Big story of the morning. General Motors moving to increase production in the U.S. The automaker says it will invest $4 billion into 3 plants in the U.S., including the Orion Assembly plant in Orion Township. This is all on the heels of that 25% tariff on imported cars. Jeff Reitmer is a professor of supply chain management at Wayne State. We've been talking to him a couple of times throughout this process. Jeff, thank you for joining us this morning. First of all, we haven't seen anything yet, but we're anticipating the president of the White House kind of making a victory lap on this one. What are your thoughts?
It doesn't surprise me. It kind of surprised me. It doesn't shock me that GM's going to do this. The market for EVs just isn't there, and they need to recoup some of that. So investing this makes sense. As far as a victory lap, if you will, it's important to remember that these aren't really manufacturing jobs. They're assembly jobs. We're still going to bring a lot of material and so forth in from Canada and Mexico to put vehicles together.
So if you're looking at the reasons and the why behind this, do you put more eggs in the basket of tariffs, or is it really more about the lack of demand for EVs, or is it both?
It's really both. The tariff certainly has an effect. And in talking to some of the people at GM that I know, months ago, they were talking that everything at that point was on the table. And you will probably see something like that from from Stellantis and from Ford. Ford is in a unique position because they already assemble most of their vehicles here in the United States. They do have capacity at some of the other plants, Flat Rock, Kansas City, and so forth. So bringing some of that back would not be a real stretch for them.
So, and again, you alluded to this, I just want to dive into this more, is that while the vehicles may be assembled here, the guts of them, a lot is still going to be coming from overseas. So how does this help General Motors offset some of the cost of these additional tariffs?
They still had that 25% tariff on vehicles coming into the United States. So that helps them avoid that. They will still see the tariffs on those parts coming in, but they can make that up in savings with assembling the cars essentially here in the U.S.
All right, so let's talk more about electric vehicles then. Obviously, the plan was for Orion to become all EV, and now that's not happening, going all gas, with now all electric vehicles being shifted down south to Hamtramck. So we knew that the demand for EVs wasn't keeping pace with expectation, but does this tell you even more of what that demand is not?
It really does. And again, some of this is surprising and some of it's not. The administration is now saying they're going to take out the taxes on EVs. And they're also going to put a tax on hybrids to make up for the loss in gasoline tax revenue. So it really does say a lot about what the automakers think of eventually the EV market. It's just going to take longer to get to that point where you're going to see that demand that they want or they need.
You know, if I recall correctly, I believe General Motors said they were going to be all EV by 2035. We're 10 years out from there at this point. I don't know if that is still a realistic goal for them. What do you think?
The way the market is moving now, I don't think it's realistic. And you have seen some of the models that they were going to produce next year being pushed out. And I think you may see more and more of that. The volume at this point just isn't there. The problem also becomes a lot of suppliers invested in supporting the EV movement, and the volumes aren't there. So it's really going to hurt the supply base at this point.
So one more question for you. We could talk the lack of EV demand for hours if we wanted to, but this obviously is the automaker's decision then. But the shift away from EV, retooling Orion, how does that affect your tier 1, 2, and 3 suppliers?
it is really going to hurt them in terms of trying to support that move from what they thought it was going to be, the EV market, to now tool back up for the gasoline or the internal combustion engine products. You're also going to have to look at, are they going to start moving some of their manufacturing back to the US to avoid tariffs? So those investments, and coupled with cash flow from the tariffs, when you bring something in, you've got about 7 days to pay that tariff. You look at the terms and conditions from your customer, they can have up to 90 days to pay. So it's not unrealistic to expect that there's going to be some suppliers that could actually declare bankruptcy over some of this.
Really? Wow. Okay. Jeff, thank you so much for your insight. We always appreciate your time and your expertise on this subject.
Not a problem. Always happy to be on.
Thank you, sir.